Speaking of going abroad in all the earth, birds do that. And I have recently, well, perhaps not too recently, but um, I've had a passion for photographing birds and following them and hunting them and trying to get the perfect shot, which is pretty much impossible, but I certainly give it a good shot. And I just thought this morning I'd share a few ramblings that hopefully I've brought into some semblance of order. A few sort of facts about birds and different aspects, feathers, their flight, color, and community, and what that might mean for us, how we can sort of carry that across, I suppose, into our own lives. So, cool beans. So feathers, I'll start with feathers, and hopefully you can enjoy looking at some of my better shots throughout this short devotion presentation, whatever you want to call it. Ramblings, if you prefer that as well. Bird feathers are pretty interesting. The sheer variety of feather types in birds is also enormous, but the basic structure of each feather is the same. So I'll put up a little diagram here. The feather has the quill, as you can see here, and that's attached to the bird. And from each quill, you get a barb, lots and lots and lots of barbs. If we look closer though, each barb has a little barbule, they're called, or many little barbules, and each barbule has hooks along it. And those hooks connect and align in the opposite direction. So in this way, the barbules can move just a little bit and the feathers can shift, but they don't come apart. And they're so finely woven that no air can actually get through. If there is too much pressure though, or something hits the feather in a strange way, the barbs separate and that prevents damage to the feather's structure. If this happens, the bird can actually realign those barbs and basically put its feather back together again by preening, which I'm sure we've all seen birds rubbing their beaks along their feathers to fix them up. And they secrete a waxy sort of substance from the, here we go, here's a good scientific word, from the uropygial or preen gland. Yep, I looked that up. I didn't know that off the top of my head. And so they release this waxy oil and it helps to hold the feather together and help it to move. And then it returns the feather to the way it was at the start. But how is this relevant to us? Apart from being amazing, I think there are a couple of lessons we can take from it. We all have different parts of our lives that keep us busy. We could call these the barbs. And of course, each part has its own important aspects that keep it important and relevant to us. We might call these the barbules or the hooks. But if we don't have a strong foundation, the quill, the rest falls apart and it has no structure. I'd like to suggest, and for me, that God should be our quill, and God for me certainly is. And importantly, he is forgiving. And if we wander, if our lives start to come apart, our feathers become ruffled, you might say, we can realign our lives like a bird can realign its feathers. And Ephesians chapter 1 and verses 7 and 8 say, "In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he lavished on us." Second thing I'd like to look at is bird flight. How amazing is it when you see a bird fly? I always find it amazing how birds of all different sizes can be fast and agile or slow and graceful. And particularly those small birds that fly through the tiniest gaps and tuck their wings in and seem to just go through a brick wall. It's amazing. I think humans in general have always had a fascination with flying. Of course, we have aircraft these days and we understand, as much as a human ever will, the physics of overcoming gravity for a while. To get a basic overview understanding of how birds fly, I'm going to cheat and show you a little video that I've pinched from YouTube. It probably goes a little bit fast, but hopefully you can get a few of the basics and hopefully it helps a little bit. See how we go.
How do birds fly? Well, it mostly has to do with the shape of their wings and how they move them. When a bird flies, it flies through the air, and the air flows over and under the wing. If we look at a section of a bird's wing from the side, we see that it is big up front and then tapers off toward the back, kind of like an airplane wing. When talking about flying, this shape is called an airfoil. Now the air flows around the wing like water in a river. If you've ever been on a river, you'll notice that it moves very slow at the wide parts, but speeds up really fast when the river narrows. This is because the same amount of water that was in the wide parts now has to move through a much smaller space at the narrow parts. And so the air is just like several rivers flowing side by side past the bird's wing. The shape of the wing, the airfoil, makes it so the river of the air that flows over the top of the wing gets squeezed and narrowed. And just like a river, this air has to speed up. And the river of air that flows under the wing actually widens and slows down a little. Now imagine you are traveling down this river of air and you have a cannon on your boat. The airfoil is an island and you are trying to shoot it with your cannon. But you have to reload the cannon every time you fire, so you can only shoot it once every few minutes. If you are going really fast down the river, you will only have time to shoot a few cannonballs at the island. But if you go down the wider part of the river at a much slower pace, you will be able to hit the island with more cannonballs. This is kind of what happens with a bird's wing, but instead of cannonballs, it's the air that's landing on the wing. Because the air on top is pushing less on the wing than the air on the bottom, the wing gets moved upward. This upward push is called lift, and it's the main reason birds are able to fly. But there are other tricks birds use too. To get more air to pass over their wings, birds will flap them, especially when taking off. When they do, they rotate their wings forward and down and then lift them back up to start over again. Rotating the wing forward causes the lift from the air to push the bird not only in an upward direction, but forward as well. This forward push is called thrust. As you can imagine, all this flapping takes a lot of energy, and so birds have large lungs to help them breathe and strong muscles to move their wings. Not only that, but their body is shaped to cut through the air efficiently, and their bones are hollow, which makes them very lightweight to begin with. So a bird relies on many tools to get through the air, not just its wings. As for people, we are heavy and can't produce the energy needed to fly by ourselves, so we use aircraft to get through the air. And even though we use machines to get off the ground, it's still fun to imagine that we can fly like the birds.
Apart from being immensely cool, I think there are a number of few ideas that we can draw out of this, and hopefully you have a small understanding of how flight works. Hopefully the video helped a little bit. So the first thing I think we can take from this, or that I have taken from it, is that flapping takes a lot of energy for birds. So they don't do too much of it, but sometimes they have to. In our own lives, I find that sometimes I'm very busy and feel like I'm struggling for time. I think this is a reminder that whilst we can cope with this in the short term, it saps our strength, and we do need to balance it with rest. Another thought about our life pace from bird flight is we've possibly all seen a flock of swans or other similar migratory birds flying in formation. By doing this, the lead bird works harder and there's less air pressure on the other birds and they don't have to fly as hard. That's a very bad explanation of what's happening, but very simple one. By doing this, in the same way, if we support each other, we can achieve more with less energy. And every now and again, we can take the lead and support others, I think. So as Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11 says, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Color. Birds come in a variety of colors and shades, and many have an array of complementary colors that you expect to make them pop out of their surroundings. And yet somehow their camouflage is still very good and quite irritatingly good for a photographer like me. Bird colors come from different pigments in their feathers, and these pigments are coded in their DNA. Despite this, though, many species have different races of the same bird that show differences in color. just to add to the variety, I think from this, apart from admiring the beauty of the colorful birds, we can see that different colors can work well together and adds difference to what otherwise would be monotony. I think that having variety like this in friendships can be beneficial, as different opinions can add to our perspective and help our understanding of different topics. I've found this very helpful. I have a number of friends who are non-Christians, but also who are Christians with different backgrounds and different perspectives. And I think that being able to look at things differently and critically has been very useful for me. As Ecclesiastes 4 verse 9 and 10 says, it's possibly a little stretch to apply it to this, but two are better than one because they have good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them. Last, come on. Nope. There we go. The last thing I want to look at is community. So if you're feeling a bit snoozy, we're nearly there. And just two more slides, this one and another one. As I sort of touched on in the birds flight section, birds rely on each other a lot. Most birds will fly and feed in flocks, as one or two can look out for danger and the rest can focus on the food. Food, it's good. And I think that spending time together sharing food is a very valuable thing for our emotional support and just good old enjoyment. I enjoy food a lot, personally. If COVID has taught us anything, it's that physical presence is important. And like the birds, I think sharing food is a great way to do that when we're allowed to. key thing, but when we can, I think sharing food with other people and being able to talk over food is a great way to share common experiences and our differences, which I did also touch on. As Acts chapter 2, verse 42 says, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. So to finish, I could talk about birds. There's a tongue twister. Talk about birds for quite a long time. And if any of the photos have interested you, I have a lot more, and I'd love to be able to share those with you as well. Just my way of enjoying God's creation. But I'll leave you with this verse, and hopefully these thoughts have been interesting to you. Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 to 31. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Amen.